Well, and there's a lot of like trans people moving from BC to here
Oh.
just because it's cheaper.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
There's a lot of people who are foregoing the medical availability of BC.
Okay.
Simply because they can't afford to be there anymore.
Okay. They just can't find housing and...
No housing.
Okay. Yeah.
Like,
And the housing that's there has bugs.
Oh, really?
I had bed bugs for several years.
Oh, my
Black
God.
mold, rats in the attic, raccoons trying to climb in the window.
Huh.
It was a whole thing.
It's just too urban in a way. Or too cosmopolitan, like too many visitors coming in and bringing stuff maybe sometimes.
There's just so much money to be made for certain people and properties.
Okay.
To the point where the tenants become really unimportant.
Okay.
Okay,
so slumlords, kind of like... I don't know what New York is like now, but, Trump used to be a landlord in New York. And the whole slumlord thing, like, there's a big tradition of that in New York as well. Like, they don't really care. In fact, I know in, it's like San Francisco Bay Area, oftentimes slumlords will even set fire to a place because there's rent control. Mm-hmm. So if you set fire to it, it burns a bit, you can kick everybody out. Because it needs renovations, and that takes a long time, and blah blah blah. So, yeah, it's bad. In some of the coastal cities, things are getting really bad. Yeah. So in the U.S. too, people are moving more to the center of the country as well.
That's really interesting.
But then, like you're saying, similar situation. They're encountering more conservative ideas and less funding for the public. For healthcare, for even fixing the roads and, various things that everybody shares. So
I will say, though, there's really only one way that, we're going to be able to access what we need here, which is if we have a community here. Because if people...
So that's good. There's an influx and you'll have a bigger community.
It is good in the long term, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's scary in the short term because people who don't like us or have an issue with us will see that and go, oh my God. But in the long term, I believe that means on an individual basis, more people, advocating to their child's school, advocating to their doctor, advocating to whoever, and that maybe that makes it a little easier for the next person and the next person and so on.
Yeah. It's like in the U.S., conservatives complain about like people from the coast coming in because they're bringing their values, those California values or something, but, people are allowed to move.
Yeah.
And, they can come on up to Alaska. We'd welcome that up in Alaska. So, come on over, I guess, to Alberta. It's obviously sounds like a struggle, but, oftentimes, I think really good activism can come out of struggles. Like you're saying, if you work together, you form good relationships and decide what to do.
No, exactly. And the thing is about being here is that because the cost of living is a little lower, we can actually think about this stuff. We can actually think, how would I respond, if someone...
Instead of working 2 and 3 jobs and just barely getting by and like, okay, where's that...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, actually, some artists are doing that as well in the U.S. They're moving more to rural or central places because, they don't have to work as much and they can make more art. Instead of just making money or whatever,
Well, and when lower cost of living, you're able to support others, right?
Yeah,
right. You don't have to work the 3 jobs to maybe donate to the local Boys and Girls Club or the local shelter.
Yeah. Or AIDS charity or something.
Or anything.
Yeah.
You can work your one job, have energy to spare to go volunteer, have energy to spare, have money to spare to buy that extra bag of groceries, even though it's so expensive.
Dream about, buying a house together, even communal living.
Oh my God.
Yes, I know people, like I just met some people in Spokane who are doing that. And, I called it an experiment because in a way, if you live in such a capitalistic society, doing things communally is really a radical thing. It's risky. You're taking risks in trust as well as financially. It's a lot of work, but that's also possible in a cheaper place, as long as you get together with a lot of people to do it.
I mean, I was only introduced to the idea of communal living while being in Vancouver, and that was because it was like...
Oh, because you had to.
Because you had to.
Yeah, right.
There's the joke of you have a 3-bedroom and 7 people, and everyone's working 3 jobs.
Yeah.
You know?
In San Francisco, they were having, like, literally closets that were renting as apartments. Like, literally. You know, just like, you know, whatever.
I've seen solariums go for $1,500.
What's a solarium?
Like a sunroom.
Oh, okay.
I feel like there's another word for it in the States.
Like greenhouse or like covered porch.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Wow. Goodness gracious. Yeah, Vancouver, I guess it's a lot like the coastal cities on the States. That makes sense. There's something more sophisticated about Vancouver, though. I've been there before, and it seems like culturally just really rich there, even though it's very difficult.
Yeah, I was really lucky to grow up there. I honestly felt really devastated about having kind of having this choice in front of me of like continue to struggle so hard, like holes in your shoes, empty fridge struggle, or you know, this other struggle where you know, maybe we're getting called like faggots in the park, but at least we're not starving. We're not living on top of other people. We don't have bed bugs, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I can't even imagine having bed bugs. Like, sometimes I get itchy skin.
Don't imagine it. It's the worst.
I get itchy skin from living in a dry place in Alaska because it's really, you know, Fairbanks is pretty dry. I can't even imagine. Like, oh, that would be so horrible.
It's awful.
Yeah. I mean, it would, like, I think it would make me feel bad. Like, not just physically, but just bad.
It really does. It reduces your, like, sense of self-worth.
Yeah.
To be kept in that...
Yeah.
Like, it's not a good feeling. When I was living in Vancouver, before we moved in together, my prior place also had bed bugs, but it was from our neighbor.
So this is really an epidemic of these.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
It's bad in Vancouver. It's really bad. Rats, you know.
Wow.
Cockroaches.
You know. Wow.
Like, it's the port city. Everything comes in.
Yeah.
Stays,
Lots of traveling.
It's not cold enough to kill off any pests either.
Yeah, that's one thing we have in Alaska that's great. Yeah, it's so cold that things cannot survive, which is great. Yeah. We do have to worry about moose, but you know, you can often see them coming, which is good. And they're not going to make you itchy. Yeah, and in fact, you want to see them if you're a hunter, you know. So it's cold here too. Oh yeah, because you're in the center. You're probably getting some of our weather too. It's like coming down. Yeah.
I mean, this is the biggest largest northernmost city in Canada.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, I think we pretty much situated ourselves then. So you were just mentioning that you have. I mean, we are in a city and. You know, this is a quite diverse city, actually. I was surprised at that. It's way more diverse than Fairbanks, definitely. It looks like there's a lot of recent immigrants here as well, cleaving very strongly to their traditions of their home countries, and also, you know, people who've been here for a long time. So I guess I'm surprised that you would be called names in the park. That seems, because this is a really kind of a large place. It's cosmopolitan. What was going on there? Just like, because you live around a bunch of parks here.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, it was something actually that I was pretty used to in Vancouver. Not specifically like the slur, but somebody who just was not well. There's kind of a situation right now in our city where there's a lot of homeless people. There's a lot of mentally ill people.
Well, if they're pulling back on public services, that's what happens.
That's exactly what happens. Yeah. And so you know, there's a handful of times where somebody will just come up to you and start saying things, and it's like, I'm not gonna get into this. I am just gonna exit the situation. But it is unfortunately the white population of a certain economic demographic that is usually, you know, I know someone who was accosted by a bunch of guys on the street just yesterday.
Are you talking about like farmers coming into town, or not even
oil workers, construction workers?
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to like generalize, but the people who live a little further out from the inner city, they usually have more money. They usually have a detached home. They usually have a car. And those things just, change the way that you see the people around you, right? If you're afraid of somebody coming onto your property,
okay,
you know, there might be a different attitude.
But I'm constantly thinking about the difference between the U.S. and Canada, just because I'm sort of obsessed with that, frankly.
Yeah, it's interesting.
But it sounds like here you don't have to worry about stuff like gun violence and that sort of thing.
Not as much.
Yeah.
It was even less in Vancouver. It was really not even something that I had ever thought about in my entire life until we moved here, and people actually care about their gun rights.
Okay.
There's a lot less of them than in the States. You know, people don't walk around carrying them openly, I don't think, anywhere in Canada.
Okay.
No, that's not legal in Canada.
That's not a thing.
Yeah,
okay.
and
we have constitutional carry.
Yes.
Yes, and it's becoming more acceptable in a lot of states. So just right there. Yeah.
It's scary, and there is some gun violence here. There's, I would say, more knife violence.
Okay.
But it's as you said, that like they pull back on social funding and on health funding.
Yeah.
This is exactly what happens. People get
and
hurt.
that affects everybody.
It really does.
I mean, it really does. It reduces everybody's quality of life as well. It specifically targets the people who need the help the most, that we should be helping because we're in a society, right? Mm-hmm. But then it does ripple out to other people because, of untreated mental health, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course you have people who are also trying to whip up a frenzy about
Right.
unrelated things, like
Right.
15-minute cities. They're gonna all corral us into little pens, or they're gonna force us to take vaccines. And currently, right now, it is drag queens are indoctrinating our children. Trans people are groomers and pedophiles. Actually, just recently,
so that whole stream from the U.S. is coming up here to affect y'all. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
We both have a couple of like what we kind of jokingly call Fox News relatives, because I don't think most people up here watch Fox News, but it's like there's probably some equivalent.
Yes.
And
there's others too.
Yeah.
There's other even worse ones. I mean, arguably even worse.
Yeah. No, there was even an incident a couple weeks ago in Kelowna, which is a slightly rural city in BC. Okay, maybe rural is the wrong word, but it's a bit more
northern.
North. Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody's Fox News grandpa came to a track meet and accused a 9-year-old girl with a pixie cut of being transgender and demanded to see certification as to her birth gender, and said that she shouldn't be competing. And his wife was calling the girl's parents groomers and pedophiles and all this stuff. And, ultimately, like, action was taken really quickly. He's not allowed at any school board events anymore. They moved the event
harassing
clear
a child.
across the field. Yeah, harassing a child. It is scary to see this stuff.
Yeah.
It's also, I think, really important to look at the way that the community responds, because even where there is just a tiny community, the Pride Parade is 5 people walking down the street, they will come out and say, like, this is wrong. Don't do this in our community. They'll stand there in the rain, 4 people with trans pride flags in front of the library protecting kids, which I think is really wonderful.
Yeah. And you're finding this is the case here, where small communities are becoming more active like that, like protecting people's rights?
Yeah, it kind of seems like there's a local community called Ponoka, which recently had their first ever Pride. And it was... Is that
like one of those crossroads kind of communities?
Yeah, it's kind of on the outskirts.
Okay.
And they actually had... I'm not totally clear on all the details, but my understanding is they had someone from the community start to try and lead this crusade against trans people, against drag, against pride. And in response, they had their first ever Pride.
Yeah.
And some of our queer politicians from here
we don't want any of
there.
that shit, right?
It was awesome.
Get out of there.
Literally brought tears to my eyes to see kids sitting there with trans pride flags around their shoulders.
Cool.
And yeah, it's wonderful. So things are hard, but I feel that they will improve.
Yeah, it sounds like it's gonna. I don't know how long has this been happening. It sounds like it's gonna get a little bit worse, like
before it gets better.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't like to make predictions like that, because all of this is actually surprising to me that all of this is happening. Yeah. Because I thought we were making some progress.
Well, a lot of it is, I think, also in response to what's happening in the U.S. Our premier, so the leader of our provincial government, said that she looks up to Ron DeSantis.
Oh, no.
And that she strives to emulate him.
Oh,
right?
no.
So it's there's
and he's the worst.
He's the worst.
I mean, besides Abbott down in Texas, he's really the worst.
He's like a demon.
Yeah.
It's awful. And so I think there's a lot of they're trying to take the opportunity to stir up a frenzy about stuff that has nothing to do with healthcare, education, where your taxes
or Canada.
Or Canada, right? It's trying to put a target on a small group of people who aren't really going to be able to defend themselves in the grand scheme of things. I do believe, though, that it will blow over eventually.
You think so? Okay.
I think because with visibility comes vulnerability, right? People didn't used to know what top surgery scars look like. Now they do.
Sure.
And so with that visibility is kind of like, well, I didn't transition to become a spokesman.
Right.
But
but you kind of have to.
You kind of have to. Yeah. And that's the
You're
point
like
that we're
thrust
at.
into it, you know.
Yeah. And I hope that someday people can come out and transition and it's not a big deal and nobody ever questions them. That's just not where we're at yet.
Yeah. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work. Speaking of that, are either of you involved in... my understanding is you haven't been here for very long, you know, currently. But are you thinking about becoming involved with any groups or anything like that? Do you see any groups doing some pretty good work around here? Do you want to do any shout outs or?
Yeah. There's a couple of awesome groups that we've either like checked out once or twice, but just haven't really had the opportunity to join yet.
Well, it sounds like you work a lot and you're kind of establishing yourself.
Yeah. So Pride Corner on White Ave is one of our biggest kind of cosmopolitan streets, if you will. And there's a street preacher around here who Pride Corner developed as a way to protest him, to stand there and drown him out while he's being homophobic.
I've heard of him, actually.
Oh, have you?
Yes. Somebody else was talking about him.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's, you know...
And that there was a response and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. There's trans people here who are working on self-defense training and helping other people do that for free.
Yeah. Like martial arts or
martial arts. Okay. There's, you know, it's like
in the U.S. we actually have some firearms instructors as well who are very welcoming to trans people. Like some of the relatives, for instance, are trans or they themselves are trans. Okay. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
We even have a socialist rifle club.
Oh, cool.
It's national. Yeah.
That's so cool.
So.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So you were talking about self-defense in terms of like, martial arts and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Mostly just that, like right now, because there isn't funding and support, a lot of the groups and stuff are very unofficial.
Okay.
So
do you have to be official?
You don't have to be official.
Okay. Are you talking about like the non-profit status like they have in the U.S.?
Yeah, like some
I know you have different words for things, but I don't know what they are.
I don't even know.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So some groups kind of exist in that gray area. But I just really haven't had the chance to like get out there and join anything. However, we are going to check out the Pride Center. Soon. I think this weekend.
Is that like a city-based one or?
That is, I believe, a nonprofit. I think because they keep really weird hours, so they must be.
Is it smaller? When I think about ones in the U.S., I think kind of big. In a city.
Yeah. The one that we have here, I think, it mostly consists of a queer library and some people who are in the office just a couple times a week.
Okay, so very small.
Very small.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they offer things like youth movie nights and stuff and get-togethers more so for the queer youth. There isn't a ton of programming for like queer adults.
Okay, so it sounds like there's an opportunity there for some activism to go on.
Yes.
Whether that's social stuff or peer-to-peer support or punching up with the your state government, provincial government, etc., and maybe municipality or whatever's going on. Yeah.
There is one thing that I have started working on, started planning, but I am.
It's good to have plans like that.
I'm working on creating a database for surgical results here in Alberta because currently there is no such thing. And what is happening is
that... Right, in other places that's more established.
Yes, so in Vancouver, I had that. I went and looked at all the surgeons and I went, boom, I'll take that one. It was great.
Right, because it depends on your body type too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Like some surgeons do well with really, really thin people. Some do not do well with bigger bodies.
And different methods as well, because we both had a drainless surgery.
Okay.
But a lot of the surgeons here do use drains. So what was kind of happening is that people are having to go to individuals and say, hey, I heard you had surgery with this doctor. Can I see your results? But of course, like I know for myself, when I was just riddled with dysphoria, it was very easy to be judgmental and not necessarily kind.
Yes.
And
it's so vulnerable.
Yes.
To show your body even to other trans people.
Yep.
And I have definitely experienced what you're talking about, where you will be judged a little bit, and that stings so badly.
From other trans people, it's the worst.
It stings so badly.
So I put out a message asking if anyone would be interested.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of people would be willing to contribute anonymously.
Yeah.
And I think that would be awesome, because right now there's nothing. It's like, oh, you can have this doctor, and nobody knows anything about them.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working on right now.
Yeah. Well, goodness gracious, that's very direct activism. Yeah, that's really wonderful. And, it's really personal too, right? Because you have just had that done, and it's been kind of a struggle. You're accessing care and that sort of thing. So this is really great. It's really great that you're thinking about other trans people. Yeah. How about you? What you thinking about?
Well, in terms of community action.
I know you're
stuff,
very busy.
I'm very busy.
Yes.
I do work an awful lot.
Yeah.
But I seem to have a bit of a knack.
Are you obsessed with something too?
No.
Sometimes activism takes a little obsession.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
I just seem to have this ability to find people who need support in their transition.
Okay.
It seems like every workplace I've gone to, I've found somebody either just coming out or have just come out and started their transition, but they don't have any support, or they're trying to change their name at work, and I go, hi, I've been doing this for a while. Nice to meet you. You're not the only trans person in the workplace. I don't tell just anybody.
Well, you're very solid, so I can see why people would come to you. No, just there is some nervousness here. I mean, you're part of an interview and that sort of thing, but I can tell you've done a lot of work on yourself because you've had to, right? You've had to take really good care of yourself, and you do. You work really hard, so I can see why people come to you, because they're like, yeah, this guy, he's gone through it, and he's on the other side. Yeah. Yeah.
He's a fabulous mentor.
Yeah.
I was very lucky to have him with me as I was transitioning.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's cool, too, that you guys have been in each other's lives for so long. You know these kind of stories about each other. It's really sweet. It's so sweet. Yeah.
Give me eyes.
But please tell me more about this kind of mentorship. Really, it's mentorship that you're doing. Yeah.
Well, and I'll be honest, it's never been intentional.
Yeah.
I, for years, said I didn't see myself as part of the community, or I wasn't actively trying to be part of the community.
Oh, you were post-trans? I'm just a guy, I'm just living my life?
I mean, I kind of looked like this just without the beard before testosterone.
Sure.
So I was socially masculine, socially passing pretty much before I started testosterone. Sure. And I was homeless and I was working, and I did not relate to the other 17-year-olds who were going through transition.
Right. Those kinds of issues are so different if somebody's class position or what they can access is so different.
Their level of support.
Yeah, it's hard to... I don't know about you, but sometimes I have a hard time with sympathy.
Sometimes.
But everybody does need help, especially if they're asking for it. But the sympathy part is sometimes a little difficult.
And, that's come with time.
Yeah.
And
because you can't hold on to bitterness, right?
No, and it doesn't serve anybody.
No.
But I've had, working in kitchens, they're not, they're very queer, but they're not very queer friendly, if that makes sense.
No, doesn't make sense at all.
It doesn't make sense at all. There's a lot of ADHD, there's a lot of bisexuals, but they won't talk about it.
Okay, and most of them are tattooed up the arms and up the necks.
Yeah. But there's so much homoeroticism within kitchens. There's so much butt touching.
Yeah, I know. Just smack the butt.
You're all tight quarters and everything.
Yeah, and you got to get along. I mean,
but I wasn't out.
Okay.
People just assumed I was cis. They assumed I was a cis man in kitchens for years, and I would routinely find a coworker and go, we'd have a smoke break together, go out for a cigarette.
Classic smoke break.
So, what are your pronouns? Because I'm getting a vibe, and they would just,
oh.
And I go, yeah, so just so you know, your secret's safe with me, and I assume mine's going to be safe with yours, and if, you want to go to management, let me know, and I'll be your buddy. When I was roofing, it was really, really homophobic. It was just really horrible.
Construction.
Wow. Construction. Okay, so 2 stories here real quick. In roofing, for the first few months there, was the only...
and you're so pale.
The only assigned
I'm worried
female...
about you up on those roofs.
I was the only person on the crew who was assigned female at birth.
Okay.
And a couple months in, there was somebody else, and I went, they're calling you a name that does not fit.
Okay.
They're calling you... I can tell it's your birth name, but I'm just getting... this is not who you are.
Okay.
So one day...
You got to be careful about that, though. Sometimes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one day we were alone on a site together,
Okay.
and I go... And we're sitting there and we're talking, and I go, so there's something... Is there another name? Is there a nickname or something I can call you? Because this just isn't sitting right. And I just... And they go, well, I used to be called this when I worked retail. And I go, that's a really masculine name. I go, so I think we're in the same boat, buddy. And I go...
You seem really practiced at this.
And they go, oh my God! Really? No way!
Okay.
And so they had me as an ally, and then...
Why would you do that at a construction company, though? I mean, that's really putting yourself out there. I mean, really.
Because they weren't passing.
Okay.
And they were...
Were they trying to?
They were trying to,
Okay.
and
Okay.
everyone was calling them their birth name, and it was making
Okay.
them really uncomfortable. I go, just so you know, between the two of us, you're safe.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
we're on the same crew, I'm not going to call you that name. I'll call you the name you want to be called.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
let's call you a short form so that the guys aren't going to ask questions, but you're going to feel more comfortable.
Sure.
And at the time I was rock climbing, and so I invited them rock climbing, and I kind of accidentally developed a group of about 8 trans men. All of us were trans men, all climbing, because we're facing the wall and nobody can see what's going on.
Right. So do you still run this trans outdoors group?
It was in BC.
Because you could probably get some funding for that.
It was in BC,
Okay.
but I was considering starting one up
Yeah,
here.
I think you should. I mean, we do have some glorious mountains here.
So many.
Yes, so many.
But it was indoor, right?
Okay.
But no, when I was actually in construction proper, not roofing, but like on a construction site, my site safety officer was a trans man.
Oh.
And he was this 5 foot nothing, maybe 4 foot 10, like itty bitty guy, and nobody questioned him.
Yeah.
You know, short guy.
Yeah.
Bald beard and just
no
nonsense.
I used to know a guy. He was a mover. Like he moved refrigerators and all the heavy stuff, and and he took me down to his basement once, and he had all the like almost professional level equipment there, and it was like all the big stuff and all the big iron and all that. And I was taller than him, and that is really rare. He was like a little ant, basically. He was telling me how he cinched himself up too. He was like, "Yeah, I just wrap it around," and I'm like, "I just lift." Okay.
Butch trans men like that are so amazing.
Oh, yes.
I'm like a gay little noodle.
I know. I'm cream puff too. Yeah.
My boss found out how strong I was a couple days ago, and now everybody calls me either Samson or Hercules.
Okay.
Hey, Superman, can you come help?
Yeah. Sometimes that's a curse though, because then they'll get you to work too much. You know. And then you're like, oh, I can't do anything else.
I'm like, no, I'm small. Remember, I'm small.
Yes, I know. You keep reminding them that. Yes.
But yeah, no, I'd like to redevelop that kind of group of.
Yeah.
I don't want to say a brotherhood because that has an interesting connotation right now. But
there could be non-binary people who are interested too.
Yeah.
Transmasculine, demi-male. I mean, all kinds.
Yeah, all kinds. Our group had a couple of trans feminine people towards the end before I moved. But it was really, really good, especially for a lot of these guys who were either had just had surgery and coming back to being able to work out. Or hadn't had surgery yet and were just like, they wanted to work out, but they didn't want people to see their upper bodies. If you're facing a wall, it's a perfect sport.
Yeah.
Nobody's looking at what you're doing.
Yeah. And that too, you can get some mentorship doing the actual climbing and then also the
social,
the
camaraderie,
all that stuff. That's
Yeah.
so great. That's a really lovely form of activism. I'm so glad that you were doing that. And also the informal stuff just at your workplace. I mean, that's, brave, fucking brave.
Well, frankly, this is the first workplace I've ever been. This is the first workplace I've ever been even close to out at, because I've never told a boss before this job, and I thought moving to Alberta that I would stay even further.
Yeah, right,
stealth
because it's
or
more
quiet.
conservative here.
Yeah, I was really concerned about that, but at this workplace, I came out to my boss like within the first 2 months. I just had a good vibe with him, and we were talking about just background, and he asked, and I said, well, I came out the first time, and what do you mean by that? And so I told him, I came out as gay, and then I came out as trans, and he's like, I never would have guessed. But then a couple weeks ago, one of my coworkers was going off about trans issues and how she didn't understand. She didn't understand how, trans women wanted to be seen as women in women's spaces, and trans men, probably couldn't compete with other men in sports and all this. And I kind of let her go off for a few minutes. And she said something about how, well, a man can't have a uterus. Okay. And so I looked at her and I said, well, I do. Yeah. And her jaw dropped. Yeah. And I had a really good educational moment with her where I was able to not teach, but just share, I don't belong, you wouldn't want me in a woman's change room. Right. You wouldn't.
You would get arrested or beaten up.
Yeah, you would feel very uncomfortable if I walked into your change room, wouldn't you? Yeah. And, there was no malice on either of our parts. She simply was uninformed.
Well, that's the problem, right? They put all this doubt into people's heads, and they create problems, and so people are like, trying to figure it out, and they don't have any resources either, and there's so much negative shit on the internet. I mean, that's part of why I'm doing this project, is to, have something that's better representative of who we are instead of all that crap. And some of even that crap is coming from trans people, so I'm just like, I'm trying. Anyway.
No, and it's great. Like, I don't like coming out a lot because I've found in the past, if people find out that I'm trans before they find out who I am, they will treat me like man light. Okay. Or,
can you explain that?
Man light. So, like, oh, you're probably not strong enough. Okay. Oh, or they'd come to me with their I don't want to say womanly problems, but more like expecting me to have a more emotional understanding of things simply because I'm trans. Okay.
And you really didn't have that experience. No. You started really young. Somebody like me does have that experience.
And I mean, like, I
because I started older.
I went through female puberty until 16. Yeah. Or almost 17. Mm-hmm. And I experienced the world as a female-bodied person in a church. Sure. So that was very feminized. Yeah. But I was not a feminine person. Yeah. I was very butch. I was playing football. I was breaking bones. Yeah. I was in all sorts of sports.
I hear ya. I had the wind knocked out of me so many times.
So many times. My asthmatic ass was trying so hard.
I know. I was always like third place because I was just like so small and just trying so hard. Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing that I think is interesting about the kind of like gender roles and expectations and stuff that I didn't anticipate when I was transitioning is I come across as a gay man, right? I was saying that earlier, that people always assume I have a boyfriend.
Fabulously so.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. I had never really...
you should be a model or something.
Thank you.
Like, seriously. Yeah.
I had never paid attention to the way that men treated, obviously, gay men. Because it is kind of like, I transitioned to male, but I also kind of transitioned to a different kind of male. Yeah, like, straight, cis men will often treat gay men like a different kind of man. Yeah. Which kind of put me in the spot of like, oh, I'm gender non-conforming now, which I wasn't before because I was a good girl. Right. And so I'm kind of in this position of like, people look at me and know that I'm queer, which I don't necessarily have
in some ways you lost privilege.
It's hard to talk about because like I never ever want to come across like I'm taking advantage of the fact that, you know, people do treat me with more respect when I'm like in a grocery store or if I go to a customer service person or whatever. But yeah, in general, I am treated like a different kind of man.
Yes. Right.
And it's interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I'm glad that I didn't have a lot of expectations for how I would be treated. I just was like, I gotta transition. I gotta do it now. I don't care if nothing happens. I don't care if I never grow a single hair on my face.
So really, you didn't have any like goals or sight, like of what you wanted, kind of.
I wanted surgery.
Okay, you wanted surgery.
That was the main thing. I had quite a large chest.
Okay.
And it made it impossible to do anything. I couldn't look at myself. I couldn't really go outside. I felt so ashamed and uncomfortable. And
were you able to make any like connections with other people? Like, you know, I don't mean necessarily only sex, but like with that sort of physicality, I guess.
Not in a good way.
Okay.
I was sexually assaulted a couple of times, and that in addition to the dysphoria that I didn't understand what it was, it was kind of, I described it to him right after a week after I had top surgery. I got to take off bandages and everything.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, it felt like an area of my body that had been pixelated. I could see it.
Okay.
And I looked in the mirror and was like, well, it looks awful. You know, I'm all swollen and bruised.
Yeah.
But I can actually
surgery never looks good right afterwards.
No.
So all the, you know, people always are like, let me find those raw surgery photos. Yeah, that's not what it looks like after a while. No. That's like right after, and it looks horrible. Yeah. It just does. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was difficult, but it was also the same as the testosterone. Like there was a weight off of me immediately. I felt like a different person. I was able to go outside and look around with my head up. I wasn't like looking down at the ground and hoping no one saw me. And it was almost like by the time I healed from surgery and I was able to stand up straight, it was kind of like we both gained like 3 or 4 inches just from...
Yeah, I'll tell you that's a thing, right? Because it's always like this, you know? Yeah. Or like wearing clothes that actually fit.
I would never have been caught dead in a tank top.
Yeah.
Like ever. Never. I wore men's triple XL shirts all the time.
Something like, billowy and out here.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you're more defined. Yes. So I'm assuming that you were also you just mentioned assault, but also maybe sexually harassed. Usually, people who look female and have large breasts, you know, for their stature or whatever, are usually get that. What was that like? Because I also experienced that, and I'll tell you, it was torture, daily torture.
Well, it's rough for one thing because the men that are doing this were not the men that I wanted attention from, right? Because I'm a gay man, so I was attracted to gay men.
Okay.
They weren't attracted to me.
So even when you, like before transition or before chest surgery, you were attracted to gay men specifically?
I would end up dating bisexual men mostly, but queer men. And the thing for me that was really difficult about it, about being harassed, stared at, talked about, looked at, touched, was actually the fact that it felt really validating to me because I felt like I was, I felt like I was an aberration. I was really bad at being a girl. I couldn't be a woman. I wasn't as attractive as some of my other friends. I wasn't as this or that as some of my other friends. So I would receive that kind of attention, and part of me would feel sick and part of me would feel sick, but validated or vindicated in some way. This only happens to women.
Right.
So I must be one.
And any attention for some people can be a good thing, even if it's abusive.
Yep. Yeah. That was me.
I think that's how what abusers use. You know, they look for people who are so needy like that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And I had one relationship that started when I was 19. He was almost 30. And that was a relationship where some non-consensual stuff happened.
Right.
And it was like, that relationship was kind of the crux of that for me. That was like, well, I'm being seen as desirable in this very like mainstream standard way of like a man is attracted to me and wants to be in a long-term relationship with me, and you know, he wants to get married and he wants to have kids and like all this stuff. I like would like want to throw up every time I thought about that stuff.
Yeah, and thinking about a future must have been difficult.
I couldn't picture myself. I would try and picture like my wedding, which, you know, I'm gay. Of course, I want like a great, big, beautiful wedding. But I couldn't see myself in it. I couldn't see myself getting married to a straight man either. So I couldn't, like, all of these things of trying to conceive of my future, I really just didn't feel like I had one for a long time.
Yeah. How about you? Have you, because you started really young, have you gone through those sort of struggles, like with harassment and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so...
Well, you were also in a very religious environment.
Yes.
Which is a little bit different.
Which lends itself to not being informed.
Yes. Okay.
So...
And not being able to talk if something happens.
And, you know, I was desperate to be seen as normal.
Okay.
So when I was 12, I started dating a boy who was a couple of years older. And that didn't go over so well. I was very willing to do whatever a boyfriend and girlfriend did.
Okay.
And so I would put up with whatever he wanted to do. And then I dated another boy. And then I went, this always seems to end up with me getting hurt, and I'm just going to date girls.
Okay. So girls were safer?
Girls were safer.
Were you more attracted to girls, or just they were safer?
I was attracted to being seen as masculine.
Okay. All right. There you go.
And girls would see me as masculine.
Yeah.
My best friend would come over, we'd play house. Sorry. We'd play house, and I would always be the dad.
Okay.
I never made that choice.
Sure.
It was always assigned. You're the dad. Now
You're the dad.
Okay, you're right. And so dating girls just kind of made sense. And yeah, it was the being seen as masculine because that just felt right, and I could kind of perform chivalry and do the Disney prince stuff, do the examples of masculinity I was given.
I bet those girls appreciated that too.
Some of them.
Yeah, I bet they did.
It also kind of left me feeling really confused, though, because a lot of these girls weren't gay. And I would often be left, you're too masculine.
Okay.
If only you were a real boy.
Yes, I hear that, yeah.
I wish you were more feminine. But you need to be a real boy. And I was like, I don't know what these girls want from me. Like,
I've been through that sort of dating cycle too. Like trying to date bisexual women, which I love. I love bisexual women. That was kind of my compromise after a while. Like, I'm just going to date bisexual women. But I would also try and date straight women as a dyke or lesbian or whatever. And it always reached a point where they made a choice of, oh, well, you're not real. You're not quite what I really want. There was always some like future, like,
well, maybe someday.
Thinking. Well, not quite that, but like future thinking on their part. Like, you're just not enough for what I want in the next step or something. Yeah. You know, whereas I was showing them a good time, and I felt like we were having, you know, a certain kind of relationship, but apparently not.
Yeah, I think the like pressure of gender roles is a lot for people who are not trans, honestly, because they're not
queer too. I think gender comes into the queer community a lot. Maybe not LGBT, but bisexual and queer, definitely.
Yeah. And I will say that having an ex-butch as a boyfriend is fabulous.
Yeah.
The most chivalrous. The most...
I agree.
Generous.
I agree.
Caring.
And they're usually good with their hands. Yeah. Tender, yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And working hard. Yep. Doing all that stuff. Yeah, so let's take a break again. Okay. All right, we took a break and thought I'd, thinking about how to round out the interview. This has been just an intensely interesting interview. I got to say, you're both so giving of your stories, and really, I'm serious. You or both of you need to record this somehow. I mean, more than just this interview, because it's really great. And I'm so glad that you're doing you're kind of doing some formal activism and thinking about formal activism, like the database, and then also you've been doing a lot of mentorship. I mean, you're really putting yourself out there for that too, right? Because that's your livelihood. Yeah. You're doing it at work. I mean, that's really intense. So I was thinking, how maybe you'd have some advice for parents or kids or maybe politicians who might be kind of cool, might be on the edge, or medical professionals out there, something like that. Because you have, even though you've gone through a lot of stuff that's negative, you've also worked through it. So I think you have kind of a unique perspective here.
I mean, as far as health professionals, parents, politicians, my advice is generally the same, which is to educate yourself with an open mind, to seek out people whose life experiences are different than yours and listen with an open mind. I think that a lot of the prejudice does come down to the fact that there was a void in information. They didn't know, and it was filled with misinformation, with judgment from others, with fear, things like that.
Yeah, so it's understandable if some people are confused or if they have some weird ideas, but
let's educate ourselves. Let's stop viewing it as a chore and actually a blessing that this person, in your life who's just come out, they've given you a wonderful opportunity to grow and to learn new things about yourself, new ways of behaving in the world. They're giving you a gift of seeing them as they truly are. Right. As far as trans kids, trans youngins, people who are wanting to come out or realizing things or wanting to transition, I would say, be safe. Don't come out if you're not safe. Don't come out to people who aren't safe. It's better to be safe, but also do your very best not to lose yourself. I spent 10 really difficult years feeling completely lost and completely just like no one.
Yeah, you said you were kind of pixelated out, or that you had lost, you don't even really remember part of that. Yeah,
a lot of it is just kind of a blur because I didn't want to be who I was, and I had kind of reached a place where I didn't have trans friends around me. I wasn't watching that kind of media. I was isolated, and I didn't believe that there was really a way out of it. And I feel that if I had been able to maintain a friendship through those hard times with my parents, if I'd been able to maintain a friendship with a trans person or someone like a teacher who worked at my school or anyone, a mentor, any kind of connection that I had to this is who I truly am and I can hold on to and that I can hold on to this, it would have saved me a lot of grief. I think. And it would have been hard in that, this is who I am and I'm going to continue doing this and I'm going to move out or I'm going to whatever. That would have been hard. And I definitely don't want to minimize that for anyone who really doesn't have that choice and is forced out. But to be forced back into the closet or forced to detransition, as some people view it, is really devastating.
Yeah.
So I feel that it's really important to be able to hold on to some aspect of who you are. If you're not able to be out, if you're not able to transition yet, don't lock yourself away. Don't hide out in your house waiting for the day when you're perfect and everything will be perfect and everyone will treat you perfectly. Because, it's not going to happen. One day you might feel more equipped. You might be able to feel more like yourself. And I hope that for everyone who wants to transition. But if you're not able to, just try to make friends who see you for who you are. Try to even have a diary where you write about yourself using the name that you chose for yourself. Whatever it is. Yeah. Something that keeps you tethered to this aspect of yourself that is core to who you are. Being trans is really important to who I am. And the fact that I lost this central core of myself for 10 years as a young person when I was trying to figure out who I am was really hard. So I think, my advice in general is education, open mind, compassion, learn as much as you can and try to just be flexible, bend but don't break.
Yeah. That's really good advice. Take care of yourself, Think of safety. Think of all those aspects, and like you're saying, maybe you do have to wait, but hold on to it. Yeah. How about you, sir? What do you think?
I mean, like, not to be super cheesy, but it does get better.
Yeah. I mean, that's a slogan, but
it's a slogan.
Let's go with it.
Like,
Let's go with it.
I don't want to,
It got better for me.
And me too. You
Yeah.
know? There was definitely a good portion of my youth where I didn't see myself becoming an adult.
Yeah.
And transitioning literally saved my life. And when people ask why I did, I go, it saved my life. So my advice to parents, if your kid is coming to you with a name, if your kid is coming to you if they're cutting their own hair and stuff, believe them.
Yeah.
Just it doesn't have to be hormones tomorrow.
Yeah.
Just believe them, because that's life-saving medicine.
And most trans people that I've met, I mean, there are a few that aren't this way at all, but most trans people I've met did have an idea when they were very young. Yeah.
And it's not like, I hear a lot of arguments about if you allow your child to transition when they're young, that you are conditioning them that way. That's not true.
Okay.
It's literally a name, a haircut, pronouns. None of those are permanent changes.
Right.
And allowing the child to explore that can save them from so much agony growing up.
Yeah.
Can save them a relationship with their parents.
Yeah. Right.
It's huge.
We've talked about that a lot.
It's huge. You know, my parents were somewhat supportive, but they were not celebrating me at any step of the way. And I never felt confident being out. Even though I came out very young.
Yeah.
It's always been kind of an act of rebellion.
Yeah.
And I think it would help a lot of kids coming out now if their parents would just believe them, and if they find the ability in themselves to celebrate their child just being true to themselves. Yeah. It's huge.
And get them more resources rather than restricting the resources. Let them go to therapy if that's an important thing, and not the conversion therapy crap. Find somebody, a professional who knows about these things or is willing to to educate themselves on these issues, so they can talk things out. Yeah.
Yeah, that's. I guess all I really have to say is, like, transition doesn't have to be medical to be life-saving and life-changing.
Yeah.
Especially for younger folk.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be these big scary situations happening in Kelowna where parents are yelling about this kid transitioning and therefore...
Which she wasn't.
She wasn't.
Yeah, and that's direct harassment of a child. I mean, yeah.
Like...
Kids need to be protected. They need to be protected, and gender variant and genderqueer kids need to be protected by our whole community.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be queer people saying, "Don't harass these kids." It should be everyone.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
and I'd like to see a lot of ferocious parents out there talking about that and protecting their kids, because your kids come from you. You got to protect them.
Where are the mama bears for the trans kids?
Yeah. Well, I know a few, but we need more of them. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Anything else? What do you think?
I mean, thank you very much for doing this interview with us.
No, thank you. I mean, this is my last one, and then I'm, just driving all the way to Fairbanks, about 3,000 miles or so. Yeah.
It is really nice to be able to have the conversation,
sure,
like, among us here, and like just feel, I don't know, like it's really frustrating just to see in the media all the time other people talking about us,
yes,
other people deciding how we feel and what we think and what we do. And so I think this is a really wonderful project, and I'm really excited to see.
Yeah, thank you. And also, I gotta say, this is my last interview for at least for a while, is other people can do this, okay? I'm just a fellow with a computer and a little camera and, a mic here and some headphones. It did take a little bit of resources to buy this, but once you have that, you can also do this. You can interview people in your community. And it doesn't have to be so broad like I'm doing here. Just in your community, you can focus on particular people, like maybe older trans people who, never had a voice ever, who are maybe stealth or something like that. If you have access to people like that, keep their privacy. This is really important that we have our stories out there. The real stuff, like you were saying, not the crap that's out there. So I thank you. I'm dependent on you, for this project. So I just appreciate you so much. Both of you. You've given a lot here. Yeah. Yeah. So on my way to Fairbanks, I'm going to be crying about this a little bit. And my dog is going to miss you very much.
That's a sweetheart. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
All right. I love it too, the contrast between you two. You're just such a lovely couple. Yeah. Yeah. I want to see you guys out on the town and shit.
What was it? I don't know.
There you go. You didn't loop through.
Like dancing or something. Salsa dancing.
We're white boys. We don't dance.
Clear the room.
Okay. All right. Well, you can take lessons for that. All right.
And can I just say thank
Yes.
you? It's been so good to speak with an older trans guy.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you.
I am pretty much the oldest trans person that I know in my own community,
yes.
and the only person in my community who's been on testosterone for 10 years or more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Everyone else is a year, 2 years, 3 years, and I'm kind of going around teaching about everything.
Yeah.
So it's just nice to kind of meet somebody in person who's a little further down the path than I am.
Also, well, I wouldn't say that. I've just been taking testosterone longer. But also, you might experience this at some point. I'm finding that doctors don't know how to deal with me.
Yes.
Because I'm not transitioning. I'm already, I'm well cooked or whatever. So
cooked.
Yeah, so you might find that as well at some point. Or you might have already found that where doctors are like...
teach my doctors.
Doctors are like, oh, okay, well, what do I do for you now?
Yeah.
It's like, well... Continue your education.
We are very lucky in that respect. Our doctor has a trans child.
Okay.
And so she has taken it upon herself to educate. She's the first doctor that I've had who actually knew what I was talking about, who is on top of our levels, on top of our testing. So,
yes. And that's so important. Goodness gracious, it's so exhausting to talk to medical professionals who are really smart, who have sometimes an ego, who have a position and have so much power over you, and then you have to educate them at the same time and be really humble. And sometimes I've found that I have to almost dumb myself down and be really submissive and educate at the same time. I'm like, it's like it's an impossible situation. Yeah. And then you got to pay them on top of that. Well, at least us Americans. Anyway. But you all have to go through your thing here too in Alberta. It seems like there's a lot of activism. There's a lot of opportunity for that, and I wish you well, and I hope you don't become more like America.
I'm trying.
I don't think we will. I think we're all on a good path.
Let's not make Canada America again or whatever. Whatever. No MAGA Canada.
Nope.
No MAGA Canada.
Land back.
Yeah.
Land back.
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. Canada definitely has some problems with that. Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely do. And Canada is far from problem free.
Yes.
Yes. So
and the US, of course.
And the US, yeah. So land back, end colonialism, gender for everyone.
Yeah. Yes. And more billionaires in little tiny cans that gets crushed. Yeah. Bezos and Musk, don't you want to see Titanic? Don't you want to go down there? Go for it. Go on an adventure. Anyway. Okay, thank y'all. See you later. All right.